Jimmy Kimmel, I had not watched his show in a few weeks while my wife and I moved, when we moved to a smaller space to reduce our expenses, preparing for the cacophony of changes that are happening in the nation. And we don't know which way the wind will blow us. And so we made the decision to look at so many of our expenses and see what we could reduce. And so I'm pleased everything just fell in line so smoothly. And so in the midst of that, I have not watched much television, and especially not the shows that I often watch, Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert. Those are two of my favorite shows to get the news because I have not watched the news since November the 6th of last year. Very intentional choice on my part to help me move through these times with as much love and joy and peace as I can. And so I watched Jimmy Kimmel the other day, and he talked about Trump derangement syndrome. Now, I hadn't heard it because, again, I've been trying not to be too much in the news. Um, and depending upon which political leaning someone may have, it seems that that term is being used both by those who might regard themselves as proponents, supporters, and defenders of Trump, as well as those who are opponents of Trump. And so, of course, it has a different meaning depending on who is using that term. The opponents say that people who are defenders of Trump have a derangement syndrome that's much like a cult. And those who are defenders and supporters of Trump use the term Trump derangement syndrome to signal that the opponents have lost their minds and they're not able to recognize the value of the different policies that Trump brings forth. So I don't know where you are in terms of how you understand the term, but anything that has the word derangement in it is a very clear signal of how emotionally out of balance people are. And perhaps you haven't heard, but just this week, there were 5 state senators in Minnesota who wanted to who brought forth a bill to have Trump derangement syndrome recognized as a mental health issue. Now, their focus was for it to be recognized as a mental health syndrome for folks who are opponents of Trump, and that they do not have, they don't have good sense anymore in it. So whether there's some healthcare dollars available for Trump derangement syndrome or not, that remains to be seen. And I would imagine not, since all kinds of dollars for healthcare, like public education, et cetera, are there's lots of efforts to take those things away. I must admit, I am deranged. But note, I don't know if you can read the sign behind me on the wall. It says hope, because it's probably backwards for you. And there's another pillow in the chair that says all is calm. We have been filling our home with things visually and tactily that help us remember that God is present with us in all things. Julian of Norwich, in the midst of the Black Plague, was able to write, all is well. All manner of things shall be well. All shall be well. When I first read those words of Julian of Norwich, I said, Em might be fine in the convent. I didn't know she was living through the Black Plague and the deaths of so many and living through her own illnesses, etc. I didn't know that because at the time that I was learning of those words, I could not imagine someone going through hell breaking loose and they still are able to capture the essence of wellness. And so here we are. I'm blessing Julian of Norwich. She wrote that some 500-600 years ago. And if ever there were a time I've needed to be anchored in the truth of those words, it is now. And I often ask myself and I ask Spirit, why am I alive now to go through this season of, I call it a cacophony of mess, but it's also a cacophony brought on by greed, greed for money, greed for power, greed for supremacy. And it's also this cacophony of mess that keeps people at the lowest levels of Maslow's hierarchy of need, those levels that people are scrounging and anxious for basic necessities to be met, for basic security to be met. And then people are less able to get to the belonging across groups and less able to get to spiritual growth and development. And so I ask, okay, Spirit, and why is baby girl, as my mother used to call me, or Carrietta Hazel Jackson, which is my full name, why am I here at this time? Is there anything that I can bring to this time to help others? And is there anything for me to garner from this time that I might learn and grow and experience what Julian of Norwich was able to capture? All is well. I don't have answers to those two questions, but I ask them every day. And so regarding what is it that I might offer during this time, I'm constantly seeking new ways, old ways and new ways to be a blessing to other people. Now, in order for me to do that, I have to keep watching the measure of anger that I have. And every time I think my anger is mellowing, then I, while walking the dog, see someone, as I did yesterday, who was talking up so lovingly and so kindly to my dog. And then I saw a pendant, a gold pendant that this woman was wearing that said MAGA. And then I wanted to say, get your MAGA hands off my dog. I'm just being real. And so while in that exchange, I had two thoughts. One was, there's a spirit that comes with a MAGA way of thinking. And I said, I don't want that on my dog. Because it's a spirit that's a lack of compassion. Compassion is something that we don't just stroke a dog or stroke the shoulder of a neighbor. It is when there is a need, even if it doesn't seem to serve your best interest to care for the need of someone else. That's when compassion really matters. And there's this spirit in this country where some lack compassion so much. But of course, when we lack compassion, because we are all connected, when we don't serve the needs of others, our own needs are not going to be served as well. And folks don't get that. But the other thing that was running through my mind when this dear soul was stroking my dog and petting him was, wow, what have been the narratives? What have been the circumstances, the situations, the people in her life that have impressed upon her a way of thinking that she proudly wears this pendant? And I'm always thinking about those kinds of things. And I just began to pray for her. I didn't want her to touch my dog anymore, but I was also praying for her. I want to live my life not with derangement, but with delight, and being able to carve out those moments of delight wherever they are has been my mission, and not just delight for Carrietta Hazel Jackson, but to be a bearer of delight and love and hope and peace and calm for others wherever I may go. And here we are. Our mental health is so critical right now for everyone. But what grounds that is our spiritual health. And that's why we gather to pray. Pray with us. Amen.